The most essential part of body transformation is understanding your calorie intake. You hear it all the time. You need to be in a calorie deficit in order to lose body fat. So if you're on a fat loss process and you have a calorie target per day and you have a protein target per day, it's really important that you understand how to weigh and track your food appropriately in order to understand if you're hitting your calorie target and you're hitting your protein target. So this video is going to explain exactly how you need to track certain things. And the first part is going to be about weighing your food, how to weigh your food. There's different ways to weigh your food depending on what it is. Some things you would weigh raw, so before cooking. Some things you may not have to weigh at all. Some things you may weigh cooked, right? And it's really important to understand the differences between it. So in this video, I'm going to explain exactly how you should do it. If you work with me in any capacity, if you're on a current program with the A team, you will have access to a swap stock. So how the swap stock works is off that list, you pick exactly what you like eating. You go through that list, you do your food shop, you stock it up, and you start to prep your food. Now the most important thing is, how do I weigh and track this to make sure that my calorie intake is within the requirements for fat loss? A lot of people find this process really long-winded, really time-consuming. So the idea is to try to make this as simple as possible. And the way that I see it is the process of weighing and tracking your food is a temporary process. It's part of your journey of understanding and educating yourself on foods, food groups, the calories, the protein, the carbs, the fats, which we call macronutrients, understanding it, right? If you do this for 4 to 8 weeks, you will have a huge amount of knowledge around what these foods are, how many calories are in them, and that will set you up long-term forever in terms of what you should be eating, how much of it you should be eating if you're on a fat loss phase, if you're in a muscle building phase. So this is work, upfront work, that you're investing your time and effort into doing that will completely change your life. If your doctor told you that they need to see a food diary or a food log for a week or two to understand what you're eating, this is the same kind of concept, right? Except instead of writing it as a physical food diary, you'll be logging this food in an app, and therefore you automatically calculates the calories and the protein and the carbs and the fats for you, and you know where you are in terms of your guidelines. The first thing that you're gonna need to buy or invest in is gonna be a food scale. You can get this from anywhere, you can get this from Amazon. Most importantly, you have something to weigh your food with, right? Something that's accurate, something that's easy to use. This video is not really gonna go into the actual food groups themselves in terms of the carbs, the proteins, and the fats, but essentially, if you work with me in any capacity, you have access to a swap stock. So you have a list of protein sources that are lean and are conducive to fat loss. And you also have a list of carbohydrate sources that are going to help fuel your performance in the gym. And here is a selection of items that are on that swap stock. And therefore, I'll give you some insight as to how we would track certain foods. So firstly, we're going to start with foods that don't actually need to be weighed, okay? Things like a rice cake, for instance. When you use an app to track your nutrition, either using our app or MyFitnessPal, for instance, you can scan this barcode. When you scan this barcode, it will come up with what it is, generally speaking, because it's a database, and it will come up with one rice cake and it will show you exactly what it is, right, on the app. One rice cake uses 25 calories and it's got 5.2 grams of carbohydrates. So all you'd have to do with items like this is scan the barcode and select how many rice cakes you're eating. If you're eating 3 rice cakes, you just click 3 rice cakes and it would automatically log that stuff for you. Similarly with a protein yogurt, for instance, which is protein, you would scan the barcode and it would automatically log this item into your nutrition log, right? So this is 176 calories, 24.8 grams of protein. Similarly with eggs, you don't need to weigh an egg. All you need to do is basically go into the database, click, I've had 1 egg, 2 eggs, 3 eggs, and it will be in there in the database and it will automatically calculate for you. So these are the kind of items that you don't need to weigh, you just need to track, i.e. using the barcode or using the search functionality of the app that you're using, type in 1 egg, 2 eggs, 3 large eggs, for instance. This is a large egg, you're gonna click 3 large eggs and it's gonna calculate all that for you. So you can track that quite simply, quite easily. So on the topic of eggs, if you are using something like egg whites, how much of this are you eating? So these are egg whites. So typically in fat loss, if you want to up your protein intake without adding too much calories, a lean source of protein is egg whites. So liquid egg whites are a really easy way to kind of add protein into your diet. You'd have maybe, for instance, something that I typically do with it. I have 2 large eggs and I'd add 75 grams of egg whites. How do we track 75 grams of egg whites, right? So the most simplest way to do this is in this function. So we will start off by turning on your scale. What we would then do is we would put the egg whites on the scale. You then zero the scale. What this does is now anything that I pour out of this egg white container into my pan, if I pour these egg whites out into that pan, it's going to give me a value of how much I've poured out in a negative fashion. So you would pour your egg whites out into the pan and pop it back on here until it reaches 75 grams, okay? Therefore, you then know that you've had 75 grams of egg whites. What you would then do on your app is you would scan egg whites or search 2 chicks egg whites and type in the quantity as 75 grams, which will then automatically log the amount of egg whites that you've had on top of those eggs in that meal for you. So as an example, I've zeroed the scale here for the cottage cheese. I'm gonna open the cottage cheese up, make sure it's still 0. I'm gonna take some of it out. I'm gonna pop it into my bowl here, right? And it's gonna show you exactly how much is coming out of it. 75 grams of cottage cheese in this bowl. Following the same process would be things like Greek yogurt, which you would just put on the scale as well, and things like oil, okay? So most importantly, one of the things with fat loss that we really need to take into account is the amount of oil we use in our food. Oil is extremely calorie dense, right? Things like olive oil are healthy fats, they're good for you, but they're also extremely calorie dense. So 1 tablespoon of this is going to be around 120 calories. So you'd follow the same process where you would pop this on, make sure to take the lid off as well so it's not adding to the weight of it. Pop this on, zero it, pour that into your pot or your pan, pop it back on, and then you know exactly how much you've used. And therefore you can track that and log that into your app. And all of these things need to be accounted for because all of these things add up in your meals, add up to calories, add up to fats, add up to macronutrients. And therefore it's important to track everything. These are hidden calories that we often forget about that stack up over time and therefore eat into a calorie deficit. And sometimes when you think you're not losing weight, it's because all of these things stack up, right? Similarly with oils is making sure you track sources. Exactly the same concept. If I've got mayo, if you're on a fat loss process, always go with something that's light rather than full fat. To save on the calories is easier. Zero the scale as per the process, open, pour it into your dish or whatever it is over your salad, whatever the meal is that you're having, and then pop it back on and it will tell you exactly how much you've used and then you can track that into the app. That's that concept right here, right? Exactly that concept. There's also another alternative way to weigh out certain things. For instance, milk. So if I want to track how much milk I'm putting in this mug, if I was having a coffee, for instance, I'll pop the mug onto the scale, I'd zero it, and then I'm gonna pour my milk in to the mug. So say for instance, I'm having a coffee or a tea, therefore I'll be like, okay, and you probably only need to do this once or twice because you probably know how much you're having after this. But for instance, and what you can also do is you can change the units on your scale to something like milliliters. Again, it's gonna give you a similar kind of value anyway. You pour this in, there you go, 119, 120 milliliters of milk, and therefore you can track that accordingly. So that's another alternative. Rather than using the previous method, you can also use this method as well if you want to use a bowl or a mug or a cup to put something on top. Okay, next up, we got another alternative method. So for instance, if we're cooking something, and this is quite a practical approach because if you're cooking, you're most likely gonna be cooking for more than one person, right? You might have a family, you might be cooking for you and your partner. So here's what you typically do. If you refer back to the swap stocks, which gives you the quantity associated with what you can be eating for fat loss in terms of calories and portions, what you would typically do, for instance, if we're gonna go with some potatoes, we're gonna go with some carbs at the moment, we're gonna go with some potatoes. We pop the pan on. Again, this would probably be the easiest way to do this. We pop the pan on, and what we would do is we would just typically just pop our potatoes in. So that's obviously a bit too much. Pop our potatoes into here. So say for instance, I'm going for 250 grams of potatoes each per portion. So if you're cooking for 2 people and you want to eat 250 grams of potatoes each, you just make sure this is 500 grams. And then therefore, you know that's the right amount of portion for 2 people. If you were then trying to make 4 meals, i.e. you want to eat that again, you would just double that, right? You would just make sure that's a kilo of potatoes. So it's a really simple way in which you can meal prep accordingly. All you need to do is how many meals am I trying to make here? I want to make 4 meals. Okay, so per portion is going to be 250 grams of potatoes, which means 250 grams times 4 is 1 kg. I'll make sure there's 1 kg of potatoes in here. I'm going to split that at the end into 4 meals. Simple as that. That's one other approach. The same kind of concept applies for things like pasta. You would do exactly the same thing with the pan. You'd pop as much pasta as you want in there as per the portion you're going with. You're gonna scan the barcode or you're gonna type this into your app, and therefore it's going to track everything on the app for you, right? 65 grams raw pasta is one portion, for instance. You would say then, how many portions am I making? I'm making 4. You do 4 times 65, you add that in there, you'd split the final cooked portion of pasta into 4, therefore you've got 4 meals. That's how we would work this through, right? It's always more accurate to track raw weights rather than cooked weights because of the water retention when you boil something, for instance. The methods that I've just run through can be applied to absolutely anything, right? You can imagine weighing out your food, putting into the app. It all can be replicated for absolutely anything. Like, as I mentioned, it's always better to weigh your food raw before you cook it. If you are weighing your food cooked, then all you need to do is exactly the same thing, weigh your food out, i.e. put in a bowl, weigh it out. But on the entry in MyFitnessPal or using our app is you want to type in cooked rather than raw. That's something to bear in mind because the weight of cooked versus the weight of raw is going to result in different calories. Next up is some protein sources, which here's how I would recommend to do the protein sources. So we've got lean chicken mince, okay? And this can be applied to absolutely anything. If you've got tofu, if you've got paneer, you got whatever, right? This is 500 grams of chicken mince, okay? So on your swap stock again, your swap stock is going to tell you exactly what portion of protein you should be eating per meal. So with the chicken mince, it's about 125 grams. Pack of mince, 500 grams, is gonna equal 125 grams times 4. This will give you 4 portions of food. So actually, I don't really need to weigh anything out, okay? All I need to do is know that this is 4 portions. So if you're making food for the family of 4, it's gonna be 4 portions. If you're making 4 meals for yourself, this is going to be 1 pack of this is gonna equate to 4 meals. You'd cook this up and then you would split this into 4. Alternatively, you can weigh, if you're not cooking the whole thing, you can weigh this similarly by popping it onto the scale, zeroing it, and taking out half, and knowing that that's going to be 2 meals, taking out 1 portion, which is probably unlikely that you're gonna do that. You're probably better off meal prepping and making this whole batch, and that's gonna make 4 meals. Same concept with chicken thighs, for instance. Again, if you're vegetarian, it can apply to anything. Your soya, it can apply to your tofu, your tempeh, your paneer, anything, right? Look at what the pack is. Look at what the pack is, and then go by what is on your swap stock for the portion that you want to be eating, okay? So chicken thighs, 1 kg. Maybe you're not going to cook a whole 1 kg. So my suggestion is pop this on your scale, take 500 grams out, cook 500 grams, and therefore you've then got 4 portions. You've got 4 meals out of this 500 grams. So that's the way I want you to think. It is a numbers game. It is 100% worth it. In terms of, if I said to you, this will guarantee your fat loss, this will guarantee your education around protein intake, calories, and just understanding it. And if you can accurately track this by weighing it correctly in the first instance, you can then accurately track and input the data into MyFitnessPal or through our app. And therefore you're gonna have a very good understanding of where your calories are per day, where your protein intake is per day, and where your carbohydrate and fat intake is per day. And therefore it's going to guarantee you weight loss if you hit those targets appropriately.